Own the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour, celebrating America. Coming up on this episode.
If we don't understand the history, we really will miss a lot of appreciation for what's gone on before. And we will understand what's happening now.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for this episode of On the Road with Kelly and Bob. I'm Kelly Phillips.
And I'm Bob Phillips. This is a program about people, and this year in particular, about the people who made our country what it is today.
Yeah, and that's because this year we're doing our USA 250 tour, where Bob and I are traveling to all 50 states and telling one story of national significance from each state.
Some of those stories might be things you heard about previously, or at least some version or part of that story.
And others just might be ones that you've never heard of before. And that's the case with this one we were about to tell you.
And the reason you might not have heard about this particular story is that, well, for a long time, our government really didn't want you to know much about it. In fact, the place we are about to take you is nicknamed the Secret City.
My name is David Ray Smith. I go by Ray. I'm the Oak Ridge City historian. I'm also a member of the Tennessee Historical Commission.
Ray Smith says his early life wasn't much different from other kids from his generation. He went to school, married his high school sweetheart, and got drafted.
He joined the U.S. Air Force, and that's when things begin to change.
Here I am, a farm boy now, and I walk in and I say, okay, I'm here. He said, what do you want to do in the Air Force? So I went to an 18-month electronics training school in Biloxi, Mississippi. We got transferred to Warner Robins, Georgia, and then I got tapped to go to Vietnam. So I went to Vietnam, spent a year there, and then when I came back, put in an application in Huntsville, Alabama, Tullahoma, Tennessee, and Oak Ridge, places that I thought would have the use for an electronic technician. So Oak Ridge called me first, the Y-12 nuclear weapons plant. And I worked at Y-12 for 47 years.
Growing up in the 50s and 60s, I don't remember hearing anything about it.
No, it was a secret city. It was formed as a part of the Manhattan Project in 1942. And from 42 until 49, there were gates on all the roads coming into the city. And if you didn't have a badge or a reason for being here, you couldn't get in.
Oak Ridge, Tennessee, otherwise known as the Secret City, and for all practical purposes, it was just that.
You see, the United States was in the middle of World War II and desperately needed a sure way to put an end to that war. So they acquired some rural farmland in eastern Tennessee and built a city of 75,000 people in almost no time at all.
And the purpose of that secret city? It all had to do with the government's response to a letter from Albert Einstein. And that response was called the Manhattan Project.
General Groves came down here in September of 1942, saw the land, had it bought, 60,000 acres. In late 1942, people got letters that were living here, and their letters had things like, you must be off of your land by December the 1st. And this happened in November. Just have to get off. The government needs your land for the war efforts. The culture then was, we're going to end this war. We'll do whatever.
We are a long way from what I would consider Manhattan.
New York.
How did the name come up?
Yeah, when they gave the project They had started a uranium project as a result of that letter signed by Einstein. And it had run on for a number of months, and they decided to turn it over to the Army Corps of Engineers. And when they did that, they gave it to the Manhattan District of the Army Corps of Engineers in New York City. So when they formed a project out of it, they just took the Manhattan name and attached it to the project.
But it wasn't developed in Manhattan.
Oh, no,
it was
no.
developed
Here in Oak Ridge and Los Alamos, New Mexico, and Hanford, Washington. Los Alamos is where the design for the bombs took place, and actually where the material was shipped to. Then they made the first bombs out there in New Mexico.
Why did they choose New Mexico? Do we know
Because General Groves had talked to Robert Oppenheimer about leading the scientific effort.
I know where this is going.
Oppenheimer had been in the New Mexico area up there, and actually had
As a boy, right?
Yeah, as a boy. He was there because of his sickness, and he really liked the area. So when General Groves said he needed a remote location, Oppenheimer says, I know where one is, right up here at Los Alamos. This is the Oak Ridge History Museum. You can't tell the history of Oak Ridge without Ed Westcott's photographs. But all over the town, if you look at any black and white photos of the Manhattan Project, they were made by Ed Westcott. His job was to take photographs of the federal facilities, the government facilities, but also of the city of Oak Ridge. The government built this city in just a few months. 2 years and 9 months, you went from 1,000 farms and 3,000 people to 75,000 people living here, 80,000 people working here. And Ed realized that this was an important thing that was happening here. And he documented not just the federal facilities, but also the life in the city of Oak Ridge.
Were the people that were coming here, do you think they were all aware of what they were working on?
No, almost none of them knew what they were doing. The scientists, the chemists, of course, would have known they were working with uranium. They wouldn't have thought they were making a bomb out of it. Never been done before. So most of the people didn't know.
How important is what went on here at Oak Ridge to ending that war finally?
Well, in my opinion, the fact that the war ended is a result of the atomic bombs being dropped. The Emperor of Japan actually sent someone to look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That person came back to the Emperor and said there are two different kind of bombs that have been used here. Very powerful bombs. We can't withstand that. President Truman said, if you don't surrender, we're going to bring a rain of ruin on you like you've never seen.
And let's be clear, we gave them warning
Yes, dropped
several
leaflets.
times
Yeah,
before
did.
we dropped those bombs.
Absolutely. But the power of those bombs is what brought the quick end to the war.
How does all of this make you feel personally when you look back over this history that you've been involved with? You know, what does that do for you?
Well, it gives me a lot of pride because I tell you that nuclear energy, nuclear medicine, the nuclear navy, not just the atomic bomb, okay? That's what people think of when you say Oak Ridge, atomic bomb. Yes, we did help create the atomic bomb, but look at all of the other things that have come out of the nuclear era and realize just how fortunate we are and what's being used for the good of mankind.
We're saving a lot of lives.
Absolutely,
because of
a
this.
lot of lives. So I take a lot of pride in being from Oak Ridge.
Ray Smith's what we call a wealth of information, but he also has a way of giving you that information, much of it very highly technical, especially to the layman, in a way that helps you to understand it.
I won't say that I completely understand how nuclear energy is made, but he did bring even that story down to a level where you can get the idea behind it.
One thing, Kelly, that I think we both learned, or maybe I should say something that was not necessarily learned on this story, but was certainly reinforced, was that there are definitely people whose brains work at a different level from the norm.
Yeah, let's pick back up with our conversation with Ray Smith about what went on in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the secret city.
One of those families that had to leave in 1942 was descended from a man named John Hendricks. Now, John was born in 1865, Civil War time, in Bear Creek Valley, right where the Y-12 nuclear weapons plant is today. In 1900, his youngest daughter died. His wife accused him of being the reason because he'd corrected the child the day before. So she got mad and left him, took the rest of the children, went to Arkansas, and never came back. Now, this really upset John, so he prayed to God, wanting to know why this is happening to him. Heard a loud voice during one of those prayers that said, if you go sleep on the ground for 40 nights, you'll learn the future of this place. Now, it must have been in the wintertime because, as the story goes, his hair froze to the ground. Now, let me interrupt my story just a minute to tell you the little communities that were here before the Manhattan Project. One of them was named Wheat. One was named Robertsville. We're very near Robertsville right now.
Robertsville Road.
We're on Robertsville Road, yes. And another one was the New Hope community, New Bethel community. Anyway, some of those communities still have annual reunions, some 80 years later, okay? So I was at one of those reunions a few years ago, and I was telling this story about John Hendricks. I got to the part about his hair freezing to the ground. This little lady held her hand up out in the audience. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, my grandmother put a quilt on John Hendricks when he was sleeping on the ground and fed him chicken soup because he was about to freeze to death. Now, you keep that in mind while I finish my story. When John got through sleeping on the ground, he had tremendous stories to tell. He'd tell anyone that would listen. He'd tell them there's going to be a huge factory built in Bear Creek Valley that'll help win the greatest war there'll ever be. Going to be a city built on Black Oak Ridge. Going to be a railroad spur run right down by his property line, and the seat of power for all this is going to be between Pyatt's Place and Tadlock's Farm. Now, John died in 1915. In 1942, when the Manhattan Project came in here, the first shovelful of dirt they dug was right between Pyatt's Place and Tadlock's Farm. That's where they put the administration building. That's where the federal office building is today. That city on Black Oak Ridge is called Oak Ridge, named for the ridge that it's on. That railroad spur runs right down by his property line in Hendricks Creek subdivision, named for John Hendricks. He's buried right up on top of the hill there in Hendricks Creek subdivision. And Y-12 is in Bear Creek Valley, where the uranium was obtained for Little Boy that did help win World War II. Now, they thought old John was crazy when he's telling all these stories. So they put him in a hospital for the insane. He didn't stay long, however, till he walked away and he came back to his house, sat down on his front porch, put 8 rocks out in the yard in front of him. When the deputy sheriff came and said, John, you're going to have to go back to that hospital. He said, no, I'm not going. Said, these rocks will protect me from you. And besides, God's going to destroy that hospital. The next week it was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. So they began to pay a little more attention to John. Now, I don't know what you think about those kinds of stories, but it'll get you thinking about the people who were here before the Manhattan Project.
Do we have any kind of documentation other than the lady in the blanket? Or is
yeah, the documentation that exists started in 1944 when Ed Westcott is the photographer for the Manhattan Project. He was the 29th person hired at age 20 to take photographs of this area. And he had one of the newspaper reporters and took him up and showed him the tombstone, the John Hendricks tombstone. And they wrote a newspaper column about the prophecy. Then in 1950, George Robinson wrote a book called The Oak Ridge Story. And he introduced that book with the John Hendricks story. But there is no documentation other than the descendants of John and these after the fact documentation. I want to tell you another one about how this place was chosen. Okay,
Please.
It's inland from the sea. It's ridges and valleys. It's about 20 miles downstream from the Norris Dam. But what may be closer to the truth than all of these appropriate layouts, and they came down here and looked at the place all through the summer of 1942. TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, had just built their first dam, the Norris Dam, completed in 1936. Some of the people that had to leave in 1933 when they were building that dam moved down here, and then just a few years later had to move again. Don't you know, they thought the government just come along every once in a while
To ruin their lives.
Yeah.
Following them.
Anyway, but in spite of all that, what might be closer to the truth about how this place was chosen is out, you know, Leo Szilard wrote a letter to President Roosevelt. He knew President Roosevelt wouldn't know who he was, so he got Albert Einstein to sign the letter. Now, the letter said Germany's buying up uranium ore, and we think they're trying to build a bomb. So in order to get it to the president, they used Alexander Sachs, who was a personal friend of the president. And they got him to take the letter to him. Now, I just learned a few months ago from General Groves' grandson, Dick Groves, that President Roosevelt never actually read the letter. What happened is Alexander Sachs wrote an executive summary paragraph, put it on top of the letter, had breakfast with the president, and the president read that first page, executive summary, and said, what you're trying to tell me is Germany's going to build a new bomb and we need to get it first. Alexander Sachs says, that's right, sir. He made a note, and that's what started the Manhattan Project. Now, General Groves was put in charge of the Manhattan Project. He had just finished building the Pentagon, so he knew how to put a large construction project together. He knew how to get private industry involved, and he knew how to spend money. So President Roosevelt also called in Senator McKellar, and he said, Senator, I need to put a large amount of money against the war effort, and I can't let the press or anyone know how much it is or what it's being used for. Can you help me with that? Senator McKellar said, yes, Mr. President, I can do that for you. Just where in Tennessee are you going to put that sign?
That's how that works.
And that's why we're here right now.
That's why we're here right now, exactly.
Okay.
Lots of women came here to work during the Manhattan Project. They at Tennessee Eastman that ran Y-12, they would hire young girls right out of high school to run that electromagnetic separation equipment called Calutrons. Stands for California University Cyclotron. There were 1,152 of them at Y-12 in 9 large buildings. 22,482 people working there in August of 1945. That's where the uranium came from that was in Little Boy.
Did you have any earthly idea when you came to work here what you were getting into?
Oh yes, I knew it was a nuclear weapons plant. Yeah, no, not a problem. And I was looking for a job.
Yeah.
Any job.
I was glad to get it. I thought I'd probably be here a couple of years. I hired in during a strike, so I figured, you know, this I won't have much seniority, won't last long. But we stayed here I've been here now, 55 years. So came here in 1970, right out of the Air Force, and have had a wonderful career here.
What went on here
In
at
Oak
Oak Ridge? What actually was happening?
In Oak Ridge, there was 3 things developed. There was the first thing to be created was the Y-12 plant for the electromagnetic separation of uranium-235 from uranium-238. Natural uranium, if you had 1,000 pounds of uranium ore, only 7 pounds of it is uranium-235. And that's what you need for a bomb. Mass spectrometer is what it is. Separates isotopes by the weight of its mass. Now that's the first process. They also had a process called gaseous diffusion. And that was built over at the K-25 site. Gaseous diffusion works by pumping uranium hexafluoride through a barrier material that in the space the size of my thumbnail, there's 1 million holes. So they started the gaseous diffusion process a little later in 1943 than they did the electromagnetic separation process. The third facility built here, started in February of 1943, was the X-10 graphite reactor. Now the reason it was built was to prove you could produce plutonium in a uranium reactor. Once they proved that here, they built three larger than the graphite reactor, built three large reactors out at Hanford, Washington on the Columbia River. And that's where all the plutonium came from for the gadget that was exploded at the Trinity test in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and for Fat Man, which was the plutonium bomb. The uranium for Little Boy came from Oak Ridge. So those three sites are still here today. The graphite reactor is now a National Historic Landmark. The Y-12 plant is still the nuclear weapons plant, the nation's center of excellence for uranium, stores all of the highly enriched uranium in the nation that's not in a nuclear weapon, a research reactor, or in the Navy's ships and submarines. Oak Ridge is the birthplace of the nuclear Navy. Oak Ridge is the birthplace of nuclear medicine because after the Manhattan Project, they realized that separation process that separated uranium can be used to separate any element. Exact same science, exact same equipment that separated the uranium for Little Boy, that separated those stable isotopes, sent them over to the graphite reactor, made them radioactive, and produced nuclear medicine. So Oak Ridge is the birthplace for nuclear medicine, the birthplace for the nuclear Navy. Admiral Rickover, a captain at the time, in 1946 came down here and went to the first reactor training school. And he realized if you make a reactor out of highly enriched uranium, weapons grade, you can make it small enough to go in a submarine. And that's what started the nuclear Navy, the Nautilus being the first submarine that was built with nuclear power. So you've got nuclear power, you've got nuclear medicine, you had the atomic bomb, the uranium for it came from here, and nuclear energy also had its start here in Oak Ridge. We built 13 nuclear reactors over at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory over the years. There's one that's still operating there now, the high flux isotope reactor, which is a major contributor to nuclear medicine and to neutron research. So that's where Oak Ridge has come from, just let's create an atomic bomb, to now look at all of the technology that we benefit from today. And if you look at the trace back to where did it come from, a lot of it started right here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
You make it sound so simple because you understand
Well,
it.
thank
But
you.
there couldn't have been more than a handful of people in the world who understood
Yes.
this
Yes.
at
At that time.
pretty much unknown.
Yes.
Who were those people who came here to Oak Ridge,
Now,
Tennessee?
an interesting thing is, here in Oak Ridge, General Groves hired contractors to come in and do the work. So he hired Stone and Webster to build the place, okay, to build the Y-12 plant. And then they hired DuPont to build the X-10 graphite reactor. J.A. Jones built the K-25. And then they operated it. He hired Tennessee Eastman to operate Y-12. He hired the DuPont company for the graphite reactor. And he hired the Kellex company to run the K-25. So now that changed over time. Eventually it was Union Carbide Nuclear Division that had all of it. And then in 1984, they split that up and other contractors have been taking over pieces of it ever since. But back to the original thought of who was running, who came here. Oppenheimer, of course, visited here. His brother, Frank Oppenheimer, worked here and lived here in Oak Ridge. And then you've got other scientists that came here over time. Fermi was here when the graphite reactor started up. Enrico Fermi. Alvin Weinberg was one of our one of the greatest scientists that we've had. He was at the original Critical Pile 1 up in Chicago, and then he came down here and became the director of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory for 15 years. I asked him right before he passed away, what's the most important contribution Oak Ridge has made to the world? Without any hesitation, he said nuclear medicine helps millions of people every year. Same science, same equipment that created the uranium for Little Boy created nuclear medicine. So it's amazing. But I'm working at Y-12, okay, nuclear weapons plant. And I began to realize that there wasn't anybody talking about interpreting the history of the Manhattan Project like I thought it ought to be done. And I figured out, well, at first I'm thinking it's very complicated. And then when I got to looking into it, I thought, no, it's not all that complicated. There's some very complicated processes going on, but the people and the history of the people is not all that complicated. And a way to get that would be through oral histories. Most of the time when they change a contractor, the new contractor brings in a president and a lawyer, and the rest of us just keep doing our job. Well, we call ourselves weebies. We'd be here before you came. We'd be here when you're gone.
Weebies, I like that.
Now in 2000, they did something that had never been done before. They brought in 100 people, replaced the entire top of the organization. So I lost my position as the associate director. Now they had to find 800 buildings and document the condition of them. Well, they made us mad, so we weren't being very helpful. And they couldn't figure it out, so they called a meeting and, to figure out what to do. And I held up my hand and I said, look, I know where all 800 of them are. I'll find them for you. So they let me do the due diligence study, which really meant I had to go home at night and learn Microsoft Access. Come in the next day and build them a database. But I did, and documented the condition of all those buildings. In about 3 months, I got some money from Congress that was earmarked to tear down old Manhattan Project structures that wasn't needed and wouldn't be needed in the future. But bless their hearts, they didn't have a clue which buildings to keep, which ones to tear down. So they called another meeting. I went to that meeting, held up my hand again, said, look, I'll make you a list of the buildings you can tear down. Old wooden structures aren't needed now, won't be needed in the future. So they said, okay, Ray, make us a list. And I did. And then I helped them for about 3 years to tear those buildings down. Then I went to them and I said, you're losing a lot of history when you tear these buildings down. Well, they'd figured me out by then, so they said, okay, Ray, what is it you want to do about that? I said, I'll be your historian until I retire. They agreed to it. They built me a history center out at the New Hope Center. They let me make documentary film. They let me start bringing tours into Y-12. Never been done before. Y-12, during the Cold War, just said to the government, bring a dump truck full of money, dump it over the fence, tell us how many nuclear weapons you want, and don't bother us anymore. So that's what we did. We made all the nuclear weapons in the nation. The secondaries, that part that has the uranium, the lithium, to make the hydrogen bomb, that's all made at Y-12. So that was the process. But after the Cold War ended, then there was talk about moving the Y-12 process out west to Nevada maybe. Well, all of a sudden we thought, oh my goodness, that's 6,000 jobs we're going to lose here. So I became the spokesperson for Y-12. Started going all around the country saying how great we were and how important it was to keep us in East Tennessee. Now, I wasn't the only one doing that. Lots of effort was made. A lot of political effort came into it. And we kept the plant. It's here now. We have over 10,000 people working at the Y-12 plant, including the construction that's going on now for the uranium processing facility. That again is the nation's uranium processing facility that's being completed there now. But that's what got me into the history of the Manhattan Project. And I started doing 2 newspaper columns. During the day, I would write a column about the history of Y-12. I did that for 9 years. And then during the night, I would write a column about the history of Oak Ridge. I've done that for 20 years, and I do it every week. So I got into the history, and I found that I have an ability to speak with anyone at any level and come to their level, essentially, and help them to understand. I love to tell stories. Stories stick with people. Facts don't. Stories do.
Why is it important to have this history, to keep it?
It is so important. If we don't understand the history, we really will miss a lot of appreciation for what's gone on before. And we will understand what's happening now better. I mean, right now, we have a situation in Oak Ridge where about 12 companies have come in and said, we want to build either nuclear reactors or processing to enrich uranium or reprocessing spent nuclear fuel. All of those companies coming in here have brought in a combined estimated investment in the city of Oak Ridge that may well be as much as $17 billion. They're bringing in thousands of jobs.
You said billion.
I did say
With a B.
billions with a B. I did. And that is the nuclear renaissance that's happening in Tennessee, in Oak Ridge. The governor formed a Nuclear Renaissance Advisory Council. We are working on building facilities to do the workforce training that's going to be needed to provide the workers for this. Over the next 5 years, you're going to see Oak Ridge population go from 34,000 people, likely up to about 40,000. And that's just me guessing. But think about it, the electrical demand that data centers are going to put on the system over the next few years.
Especially with AI.
Especially with the AI data centers. That is going to increase the demand for electricity. These small modular nuclear plants is what's going to be the answer in the interim.
One of the things, Ray, is, we built these nuclear power plants. We had some accidents worldwide, and people got afraid. But isn't that the answer now? We've got to come back to this?
Yes, we have much safer designs than those. The nuclear accidents you're talking about will never happen again. Those type reactors are not being built. What's being built, interestingly enough, a lot of it is molten salt, which is inherently safe and will fail in a very safe mode if it fails at all. And by the way, molten salt reactors was being worked on here in Oak Ridge back in the 50s and the 60s. Alvin Weinberg was a proponent of molten salt. And now, look what's happening. The whole world is transversing over to molten salt reactors. Alvin was right. It's the right way to go.
Do you think that Oak Ridge is going to be the epicenter worldwide for all of this new nuclear
Yeah,
energy?
I think you're sitting right in the apex, right in the center of where it's all going to be happening. Now, that means that a lot of it has to be replicated in other places, but a lot of the design, a lot of the effort, in fact, if we can, and Oklo, OKLO, is going to build a facility here that will reprocess spent nuclear fuel. Do you realize that just in the spent nuclear fuel in the nation, there is enough reserve energy still there? They calculate that 95% of the energy is still in spent nuclear fuel. I only used 5% of it. There's enough there to equal the equivalent of 1.5 trillion barrels of oil. Oklo is going to reprocess that. It's going to produce plutonium that can be used in reactors that will take that spent nuclear fuel and will reprocess it and consume it. So it's not just called waste. It's not really waste, but that's what they call it. And back to your idea about 3 Mile Island, Fukushima, the other accidents that cause people to be afraid. And you understand, people are also just naturally afraid of anything they don't understand.
Yes.
Absolutely.
They don't understand radiation. Okay? So anything that has the word radiation associated with it, oh, it's frightful, it's bad.
Yes.
No, it's not. Radiation is around us all the time. It's something that we deal with. We know how to handle it, and we know how to protect ourselves from it.
What does it mean to you when people come here and they get the history and you see their eyes light up and they finally get it? What does that do for you?
That's the reward of being able to do it well. When you do and tell stories and people understand and they change their thought processes because they now have some facts that's been presented to them in a fashion that they can understand. All too often what scientists and engineers present has too much jargon, technical jargon, and just not enough that a layperson can comprehend what they're talking about. So that's one of the things that I try very hard to do. Take the technical information, take that scientific data, turn it into stories that people can comprehend and understand. And it's a delight to see their eyes light up.
But Ray, this is the secret.
Yeah, the secret city. That's
Not
right.
anymore.
Where did
trying our best to
where
get
did the
that
name
out.
come from in the beginning?
Oak Ridge.
The
No,
city of
Secret
Oak Ridge.
City.
Oh, the Secret City. We picked that up a few years ago. It literally was a secret city to start with. But we picked that up a few years ago and started something called the Secret City Festival. And we ran that for a number of years. In all of our tourism promotion and everything, we talked about the Secret City Festival. Now we have a festival called the Atomic City Festival.
A little bit
A
different.
little bit different, but that's where it came from. It was just promotion.
Over your head it says construction of the new city. What is that referring to in all of those pictures?
What it's referring to is the fact that the city of Oak Ridge was built in 2 years and 9 months. Went from what you had 1,000 farms and 3,000 people, went to a city of 75,000 people by August of 1945. 80,000 people working here, 75,000 people living here, 5th largest city in the state of Tennessee, and it wasn't on any map. That's what was built here.
This was Area 51 in Tennessee.
In its era, that's right. The equivalent to Area 51 was Oak Ridge. In fact, they didn't even tell the governor that they were doing it, all right? And General Groves told Colonel Nichols, Colonel Nichols ran the Manhattan Project, Major General Nichols, by the time he retired. Colonel when he was here, and he ran the Manhattan Project from Oak Ridge, all 3 sites. Oppenheimer had the scientists at Los Alamos. Nichols had the Corps of Engineers at all 3 sites. And he built the sites. He built Oak Ridge. We're calling him the father of Oak Ridge. The story is told about a young boy who went to school and came back from school, and when he came back, he couldn't find his house. They had built an entire subdivision around it. It said that at one time they were completing a house every 30 minutes. 75,000 people living here, running around the clock in August of 1945. One of the Calutron girls, the young girls right out of high school, Gladys Owens. Gladys worked here from January till August of 1945. After the war ended, a lot of people left Oak Ridge. It went from 75,000 people down to around 35,000, just in a matter of months. So she left. She came back in 2004. And when she came back, I took her out to Y12, set her up on a stool like she'd had back in the 40s, made her picture. She said, "Ray, I never did know what I was doing when I was working out here. Can you show me?" I said, "Yeah, Gladys, I can show you." I opened up one of the cabinets and I said, "Gladys, when you were adjusting those knobs," and that's what they did all day, adjust a knob to keep a meter on a certain point. I said, "You were changing the value of a rheostat down here." She reached over and tapped me on the arm. She said, "Ray, I still don't know what I was doing, but I know if I had any bobby pins in my hair, they'd just go and go stick to the wall somewhere. Largest magnets in the world would pull the bobby pins out of a woman's hair." This is the gates that were on each of the entrances coming into the city from 1942 to 45.
So if I'm just
49.
Joe Blow and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm
You
tooling
can't get
along.
in, yeah.
You can't get into Oak
No,
Ridge back
you
then.
could not get in back then.
They'd stop you and turn you around and send you on your way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any truth to the tale that a bunch of the people that were hired to work here actually turned out to be Russian citizens? Have you?
No, nothing to that.
Nothing to
Now,
okay.
there were spies here.
There were-
George Koval is one of the most, actually, he's one that Putin gave the highest Russian award posthumously now to him for what he did during the Manhattan Project. And he worked here at Oak Ridge. And I'm convinced that he gave Stalin the information about how tough it was to produce a uranium bomb because he'd been here in Oak Ridge. And Klaus Fuchs, who was out at Los Alamos, gave Stalin the plans to Fat Man before we ever used it. That's why Russia built a replica of Fat Man as their first atomic bomb. George Koval told them to use plutonium, not uranium. And Klaus Fuchs gave them the plan to the plutonium bomb. So yes, there were spies here in Oak Ridge, but not a lot.
It's really hard to wrap your head around the sheer scale of what happened behind the fences here at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. I mean, it was a city built on secrets. 75,000 people worked toward a goal they weren't even allowed to name. But as we've learned during our time here, the secret city isn't just a relic of the Manhattan Project. It is a living testament to American ingenuity, sacrifice, and the complex road to peace. I have to tell you, Tennessee was an incredible chapter, but we have so many more miles to go, visiting all 50 states this year to celebrate the history, the people, and the spirit of America. Don't miss an episode of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour. Listen wherever you get your podcast, or just download that free Odyssey app. Listen anytime, anywhere.